The Wizard of Oz. There goes the 7-Eleven pot store, and heaven knows we're not in Kansas anymore. Then it looked like an omen right out of the book of Romans when a wicked witch was attired for Halloween and wired to the ears on methamphetamine with a flying monkey who appears to be Charlie Sheen. She embraced the mirth of rock and roll and used her face for birth control. But Sunset Boulevard's flowers have decomposed, and Tower Records was now closed. Dorothy removed her mask and iPod, behooved to ask God, why send a cyclone? Don't you have a friend with an iPhone? As if this wasn't already enough heady stuff, a noted good witch floated out of Abercrombie and Fitch in a clear bubble, and this was years before Hubble. She wasn't haunted or hovering like a rogue, but sauntered right off of the cover of Vogue, fit in Prada and lit up like Nevada. She ate draped granola as a supermodel and was shaped like the original Coca-Cola bottle. The good witch had the awe of Holly Golightly, who saw melancholy brightly, and every phrase she uttered was glazed with reverie and butter. The allure was colossal, and you could have poured her voice on a waffle. Dorothy had a hunch it'd be grand in Munchkinland, for the mayor of Leprechauns gave out layers of coupons for times of lean digits because the government was a big machine run by midgets. Holly beguiled like a heartfelt dream, and when she smiled, it melted parts of ice creams at Ben & Jerry's, where she had studied Zen with Katy Perry. The thrill of those ruby shoes were ill-used and still enchant like a sought myth to have, but can't be bought on Fifth Ave. Then Holly said, floral glory is a temporal story, but if you go to the prom and take off those slippers, you are gonna miss Yom Kippur. Yet Dorothy's puppy underdog didn't see one yuppie at the synagogue. And this was like new dough on a knish because he didn't even know he was Jewish. Holly's nerves were made of farmyard wheat, and she was arrayed with more disarming curves than Lombard Street. She was begotten dandy like the tart of folklore. And not just a la carte lore, she was the whole cotton candy store. Yet Holly was inclined to disdain the mindset of folly so vain because she was the fabled MGM production, not just cable on liposuction. The soul of her bold fortitude could have been sold at Whole Foods. She was a megawatt vegan without Botox and not just Megan Fox. Now, some winged monkeys who had become Stephen King junkies staggered in with a sick elf and a bong, and the bad witch said, please allow me to introduce myself, but it wasn't the Mick Jagger song. Then, in utter dread, she didn't stutter when she said, you willed the twister that killed my sister, so don't oversleep, for I have promises to keep, and your vice will cost, because I am the plot of Paradise Lost, not Robert Frost. The estrangement from the throne of grace is an arrangement of its own place, and no plan could revolt her because the bad witch was the first Ann Coulter. But Holly told her to apologize nice, or I'll have you circumcised twice. The bad witch was forlorn then and asked Dorothy, perhaps you'd like to be born again and sublet. But Dorothy thought, it must be a Byzantine sojourn from Oz to Tibet, because I have never seen anybody return yet. The elves thought they were elated after they got self-medicated, and in a transcendental stillness, they watched Dr. Phil, which is itself a mental illness. Doctors scrambled for refills at Procter & Gamble pills, and in that heyday, they invented new ways of being demented. There were no witty apps, and so Emerald City isn't on maps, but in the middle of an ironic yellow brick road, little fellows had a thick Masonic code. One deranged elf said, I'm a stranger here myself, but the wizard is a new wave iguana from the Tweet Gala, and he gave Madonna the complete Kabbalah in the back seat of her Impala. Thought now got complex, as Dorothy did not know what to do next without Yahoo or text, but then got shocked when a scarecrow talked about automation law and the forthcoming dread out of an application in his straw head. Now with awe and trepidation, he said, "The disenchanted robots were behooved by implanted thoughts, and you cannot prove they are not." Superficial eloquence is the glowing new star, and artificial intelligence isn't going anywhere. You are. He quoted words out of a set group that floated about in his alphabet soup. Then he sang Nat King Cole, so Dorothy bring that thing down from the pole, for though it wasn't Motown, he did have soul. She said, "You sure do say a lot for someone who has only hay for thought." But the enthralled Scarecrow said, "It's all in your head. And if for thoughts we got a penny, I'd have gotten many. I'd have bottled the inkling of Aristotle thinking and learned the sublime forms of Plato, who had turned the paradigm of norms into Play-Doh. I'd attend college amidst the keen wit of plots and apprehend knowledge between hits of pot." But Dorothy advised, "It would be wise to pause before you ask Oz to install a brain, because it can be a ball and chain that only Freud could explain when he was paranoid on cocaine." But Scarecrow was aloft and said, "If oft I go Microsoft in the head and regret becomes a dichotomy, I'll just get a lobotomy." They stopped at a small coffee bean store, but it was all 1984. The commanders of propaganda censored the jokes for the denser folks, with a hefty encyclopedia of myth and left media tethered to reports of weather and sports. The keepers of Sin's Gate in the deep state had commingled tap surfaces for single app purposes. So then everything you ordered on Amazon had been recorded by the Pentagon. Yet though they couldn't beset the whimsy of the Taliban, they did get Lindsay Lohan. Now, some trees bellowed in rages as they did not want to become the Yellow Pages. Scarecrow said, "I'm not one for knowing, but I think we ought to be going." And so they ran along a route where a Tin Man was rusted mute by a Hong Kong antitrust suit. He quivered in spastic urgings outside of Joan Rivers' plastic surgeon. Then, his Art Deco funnel head started to echo like a tunnel of dread when he said, "They got all the parts at Walmart, but forgot the heart, so that leaves me no chance to look for make-believe romance on Facebook." Turmoil began to multiply as Tin Man sighed, but Dorothy said, "Don't cry, for the only oil cans we got are those, and Iran is closed. Anyways, you may get disheartened, for the fad of it girls today are seen to be Spartan, that is, unless you're Brad Pitt or Dean Martin." But part of the Tin Man said he made plans with the heart and not the myths of the head. The mere facts of hardware wired can't compare to the abstract desire of a doll dripping in jewels with wits enchanted, even if it's all fueled by what's been implanted. They had invited him to Oz just as the bad witch alighted with menopause. She lit Scarecrow up in a ball of flame, and all the fat kids meeting at the mall eating cholesterol thought it was a video game. Dorothy advised them to work on their pecs, but they thought exercise was text. Then, without a dire pout, she put the fire out. Now, the dreaded king of the beast who fought in the ring back east chased near underdog, so Dorothy hit him in the face with a Sears catalog. The big-hearted lion started crying, but Dorothy held his head and said, "Come with us to Oz. If he doesn't make you a fierce debater, you can get your ear pierced and become an interior decorator." Then, Oxycontin Fields reaped what had been a toxic sleep after the Sackler family had enhanced ads lacquered by finance grads with no diagnosis for the advance of overdoses. But Holly floated over in a form of transcendence with an antidote for dependence on meds, and in her glorious resplendence, she said, "Perhaps it's just the big screen dream of a sought ideal, but that doesn't mean the apps are not real." Yet Lion couldn't tell if she was a Barbie doll or if it was just the barbitol. Now Scarecrow, who intended to get an ornamental education, said, "I'll transcend dental medication at Grand Central Station, and between sips of light low-cal cappuccino, I'll be writing scripts for Al Pacino." They wandered until dawn, as Dorothy still pondered on how she fell and fainted off of the canvas of Kansas that Rockwell had painted. Oh, she yearned for sojourns of wit and such, but this was a bit much. Dorothy wondered how many more allegories alone and asunder it took before she could return to her own storybook. Then, the journey to Oz became giddy, because when they turned to see, there was the famed Emerald City, and unless you had myopia, it was the address of Utopia. Set behooved to get improved, they assembled before the wizard's locked door, but trembled, for nobody had the gizzards to knock anymore. Then a deep soul gazed through a peephole, and they tried not to be queasy, but there was an eye that looked like a fried egg over easy. It wasn't clear what dread would be next, and the lion said, "Hey, we're here with FedEx." The carnival man opened a gilded flask, and Dorothy, who willed all this, asked, "May we see the great Oz?" But it was like the debate whether there was a Santa Claus. He shook his head, took another look, and said, "Nobody sees the master of such vast steepled heights. You people must have been plastered last night. And online tutors are to blame for the kind of computer game that you became. This isn't the National Lampoon, Cinderella. You are going to need rationale and a balloon to get out of this novella." The dramatic story of Oz fell from glory with an emphatic pause. Though everybody knows that subtext can now be traced to your home, Dorothy couldn't Google SpaceX on Chrome. The last hope she had received was on pause, and Dorothy now asked, how are we to believe that there is an Oz? The carnival man then bent his head as if he had been sent and said, "I'm not seeing a lot of odds against there not being a God. Don't you see? The dead is the same no matter how we bet the game. But girl, if fate ain't a pearl gate and you're not on the list at the door, that's when you become an atheist, not before." Yet you couldn't jolt her with theology until she met John Travolta at Scientology. However, they were still not sharing any profound news until Dorothy said, "Ground control to Major Tom Cruise. Can't you see I'm wearing the ruby shoes?" That had provoked her to the realm of grace, and the carnival man, who was overwhelmed, said, "Well, why didn't you say so in the first place, poker face?" The door opened to a splendor that would transcend her into the heights of angelics despite the psychedelics. There were more bongs than pixies, and this was long before the 60s. The saga abounded surreal burlesque with Lady Gaga in a pounded veil dress. But after one pill made her shoes tall, Dr. Phil didn't do anything at all. The thrilling Academy Awards was filled with anatomies being restored, and the Jet Set Gala was grand for the marionettes in La La Land, where the bought laughter became hearty in the silhouette of fame's afterthought party. The stars who were up at dawn on Cola had gone bipolar, and as the music got louder, they abused the subplot powder in a pantheon of folly that seemed good in the bygone dreams of Hollywood. The carnival man had a red painted wagon and said, "I ain't bragging, but when the ember of our blissful course gets duller, you will always remember this horse of a different color." Suddenly, descending out of a remote sky, the bad witch wrote, "Surrender Dorothy or die." But regret was not long on remorse for a bet on the wrong horse. The paradigm of haste had no time to waste, and Tin Man tilted his bright funnel head as if they had rebuilt the light at the end of the tunnel and said, "We either die alone with an iPhone tethered to the end of a database hook, or pretend together that those are really our friends on Facebook." Dorothy buzzed the inner space doorbell, But this was no place for beginners in Orwell. Oz was on Zoom, haunted sick, because he wanted the witch's broomstick. And he said, her palace lot has got 6 rooms in malice aforethought, with 6 shell baths and 6 cells for psychopaths. That's 666. Well, you could do the math. The witch's castle is an Amazon-sized alley disguised as Silicon Valley, surrounded by research monkeys on Yahoo who were then found to be searching you. The dystopia of tomorrow was in full bloom as Dorothy entered the cornucopian room and asked to borrow the demented broom. Hence, one appalling thing led to another amid the wherewithal and the intelligence wing of Big Brother. The witch emerged from her chateau maze and had the urge to set Scarecrow ablaze. Brighton Cornyard Hay was about to get enlightened and reborn the hard way when Dorothy tossed Gatorade and it hit the witch's cape. The gloss of it began to liquidate like the distillery of impeached Watergate tapes and the Holy Grail, Hillary's bleached email. She was charred to ash and clean disappeared by trash cans, not like Star magazines with Britney Spears and the Kardashians. The monkeys propped up their uneven wings and had even stopped reading Stephen King. Scarecrow kept a journal of those meetings because, as we now know, there was something eternal in what was supposed to be fleeting. Dorothy brought the lizard skin broom into the wizard's room where his corporation was online using nom de plumes behind confusing disinformation fumes. But Underdog pulled the protocol drape on an epilogue that we all cannot escape. The Wizard of Oz is the carnival man, and the whole implausible charade was made in Japan. That pride goes before a jaunty fall is certain, and that wasn't Monty Hall behind the curtain. The yarn had ran on the carnival man, and though he loved those elves, he chose to take Dorothy above himself. It's but once in a blue moon that you have your debut on a balloon. But she was dismayed and could not ascend, for life got to be the way and not just an end. She asked, "Then what about my 3 clever friends? Will I ever see them again?" Dorothy's own strife had shown that life was like the irony of screenplays on movie sets, prone to delays and the tyranny of regrets. She had endeavored too far into a moody wonderland to ever understand that she could have been a star like Judy Garland. The anticlimax of melancholy subdued became the actor's lonely sentiment, but even Max Factor knew that Hollywood was only for rent. Dorothy planned to find her way back from Oz if she can, because in her mind, it was getting to be like Prozakistan. The carnival man then pulled mirth out of what had been Woolworths, and he would incarnate the pending flight of a fickle sublime metaphor right out of the transcending estate of that nickel-dime store. He adjourned to an ad hoc tent and returned with documents. The wizard may have been a bad mystic, but then again, he had statistics, and now said, "Scarecrow, if you ain't a bard like Mark Twain, then Harvard Yard was a lark in vain. Yet mere words are nothing but air on a lease of vapor compared to an absurd piece of paper. And so here is a sought new degree tab for the wall that I got at a Malibu rehab while on Demerol. It was you who reckoned to learn rules good because you knew there was no second turn for fools in childhood. And to the unswerving lion, you were the nerve of iron in the merger of capers in a downtown ring. All you needed was a paper crown from Burger King. Alas, Tin Man, you are compassion in a brass can, but in Oz, it's a very unfashionable plan because the ghosts of breezy sentimental hearts are mostly mental in these parts. And to make one patter, you gotta fake like it don't matter. You can't chase an enchanted embrace, nor can you aspire to capture desired rapture. Here in Oz, it's just luck with notions of joy because emotions are only duck decoys. The balloon was held by bass fiddle strings beneath the carousel of space that dwelled amidst moons and rings, above a tangerine lawn riddled with green leprechauns. Thoughts of buoyant got clairvoyant, and with bright herbs in his cup, the wizard recited some ancient proverbs that he had just made up. He said, "But by the hour of grace, we once saw a place along a corn-row lane where a scarecrow was born with a song in his brain, where streams of clover grow somewhere over the dream of a rainbow." Dorothy would miss her few friends, for she knew this was the end. But as Oz checked a pump log to format the trip, Underdog saw a cat and jumped ship. Dorothy chose to chase her pup, but the balloon unlaced and rose up. She then screamed, "Wait!" But it seemed too late, and though nostalgia burned a light, there would be no return flight. So thoughts of progress waved goodbye, but you could not press save with no Wi-Fi. The balloon soared above Earth's squalor, and for what it's worth, Oz hollered, "Yahoo has got no reversal. You must have thought this was a rehearsal." It was the bitter end for Twitter friends. But then Holly, who dappled in metaphors at the Apple stores, had carousels of data and sonnets under her pastel Prada bonnet. And she said, "The great Elon Musk creates from dawn to dusk. He is innovation's apex and the personification of what's next. I'll get you a taxi on his extended Wonderblog screen to send you and Underdog back to Kansas over the Prolog fax machine." Dorothy squinted as she and her pup got printed up. But when Aunt Em saw them float through the iPod wire, she knew then that God wrote satire. The stray rendezvous had been like deja vu again, and Dorothy instinctively told them the story, but Aunt Em was thinking reformatory. "No more internet," she said. "I see that you and Marie Antoinette have lost your heads." The carnival man drank from a gem of a flask as Aunt Em suddenly drew a blank and asked, "Dorothy, you little day tripper, where on eBay did you get those ruby slippers?"